Hello and welcome to the first episode of this brand new podcast where I'll be talking to some amazing creatives within the photography industry. On today's episode, I talk to Rich Maciver, who's an active lifestyles photographer based in London. His clients include Nike, Reebok and Gymshark, just to name a few. We'll discuss starting out in the industry, being a good assistant, lighting a sportswear campaign, and how Rich is staying creative during this global pandemic. I had a great time chatting with Rich, so I hope you enjoy this conversation too. So Rich, thank you for joining me on the first episode of this podcast.
No worries, a pleasure.
How are you today?
I am doing very well today. I've been riding a little bit of a sweet spot as far as lockdown goes. Don't know about you or any of your listeners, but it kind of motivation comes and goes, and sometimes, especially during lockdown, it's been like really low. But last couple of weeks, it's been good. Been riding a little sweet spot. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I
good.
definitely found the same thing really. I think once I've accepted the situation we're in, it's a lot sort of easier to deal with. I think before sort of Christmas, when we were guessing what was going to happen next, that was actually causing me the most anxiety because sort of had jobs lined up and I didn't know if they would cancel or not. And some of them have cancelled, but I think kind of we just got to ride it out and accept it for what it is. We can only kind of do so much as well. We can't put too much pressure on ourselves at the moment.
Yeah, there's a Facebook group actually that I'm part of, and thankfully there's been a few like honest conversations in there from other photographers, because especially like online, seeing other people busy all the time, it can really be like, well, okay, so is everyone still working? Like, what's the deal? And I think someone posted like, look, I haven't worked in a year, and there's a lot of other photographers who just haven't had a job in the best part of a year. We're coming into February now, almost a year on, and there's a lot of people who've maybe had a couple of jobs and they solely rely on photography to support their family and everything like that, mortgages and stuff. So yeah, as bleak a message that is.
Yeah, I definitely see that, because it's quite easy to compare ourselves with all sorts of others. I mean, I've had this conversation a lot recently with photographers, how sort of detrimental it really is to compare ourselves with others. It is kind of, in a like you say, in a bleak way, kind of reassuring to know that it's not just us. And I mean, I feel pretty lucky that we've actually been able to work a bit throughout lockdown. It's kind of a bit of a weird grey area for like photography and film. I mean, that it's allowed to continue, whereas a lot of other people and professions just aren't allowed to work under the guidelines. So we're kind of fortunate that we can still work. There's definitely not as much happening, and even the sort of pretty established guys that I know just are very, very quiet still.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I've been hearing as well, and checking in with things like rental companies and stuff as well. It's been across the board pretty quiet. So yeah, it is quite easy to get bogged down in sort of looking on Instagram. And there's a guy I follow who was out in the States the last couple of weeks shooting a big production thing, and it's like, oh geez, everything's like you're reviewing a curated thing. I mean, I know it's been talked about a lot recently. So
have you found any sort of ways of dealing with lockdown and coping with lockdown? Have you sort of got any routines that you stick to in your days?
Well, firstly, acceptance. Like going back to what we were just saying there, that it is the way it is, I guess like dealing with that is a whole different thing. But just a kind of a routine has been, especially recently for me, has been really good. Just like the day before, setting out things that I can do and just working on different aspects of the business. That's been a really big thing since lockdown. Since this all started. Not to dwell on lockdown too much, but dealing with like accounts and online profile, like website, how your business runs, the admin side of that. For me, getting that all nailed down has been a big thing to kind of focus on.
No, I found that as well. I think that in a weird way, I might be in a better place actually moving out of lockdown, because I've been able to spend the time on sort of the business fundamentals that I kind of had put off a little bit and haven't had any excuse not to do over the last few months. But I also think that just moving and getting exercise has been insanely important, especially over the last few months. I've never really been a big runner. I've always played sport like football, tennis and things, but never been particularly into running. But I've sort of pushed myself to run a couple of times a week, and just that idea and mentality of getting up in the morning and actually moving rather than just sitting in the flat all day has helped me a lot, because it is really tricky when you're just stuck inside all day. I think people really, really need to kind of try and push themselves to move a bit more at the moment.
Yeah, it can drive you mad. It can drive you mad. I don't know where I heard this. I was watching some podcast on a Facebook group last week, and one of them was sort of a business advisor, guru sort of guy. Basically, someone part of his business is like self-help or whatever. But one of the things he talked about was waking up early, which I'm sure everyone's heard of, like this whole thing, like, you know, millionaires wake up at 5 a.m. and all that stuff. But one of the key phrases that he said was about doing something when he wakes up early that moves his business forward. So is it as simple as as a photographer sending a PDF to a potential client or something, or even if it's just as simple as like a post on Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever, is it something that could potentially move your business forward? So I've kind of factored that into my day-to-day. I've been waking up earlier, sitting for 10 minutes, just no screens, just staring out the window, you know, watching like the odd person walk their dog or whatever, and then having my laptop sat ready to where I'm gonna, you know, I put it there the night before, and I try and make a list of things I'm going to do. So email so and so, yeah, and just getting that done, and then, you know, by sort of like 6:30, 7, you've already moved your business forward. So no matter what happens for the rest of the day, you've already done that. You can kind of sleep easy that night knowing, oh yeah, I did that thing, and that could potentially progress my business.
I think just little sort of tasks and goals are just incredibly important to work towards at the moment. It's kind of, it feels like too much pressure to put huge tasks that kind of at the forefront of your mind. Just focusing on the simple, basic things that all add up, I think, is kind of the most important way to think at the moment, because there is only so much we can physically do when we're not getting out shooting new work. I mean, I know I've got so many personal projects that I've put off for sort of the year now, but just focusing on sort of planning them down to a T and getting them prepared for whenever we can move forward.
Yeah, things like that, like planning for, you know, when you can do it, that it's ready to go, and that you've actually used all this extra time wisely to nail it, rather than something that might have, you know, when all was well, when you might have just rushed something through with a couple of days planning. I think that's one way of using your time wisely.
So I know you've been working on a personal project. Would you just be able to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so I started shooting a personal project around indoor cycling. Sometimes indoor cyclists' setup can be known as a pain cave, and as a keen indoor cyclist myself, I thought it would be the perfect subject for a personal project. When sort of we were getting into summer last year, there was a lot of like people talking about personal projects, and kind of going back to what we were saying earlier about everyone looking busy. There's a lot of people doing like stuff around lockdown and working from home and being with your family and all that stuff. And it was kind of like, oh, you know, there's a real urgency feeling of like, I should be doing something, you know, I can't just be sitting here. And I think obviously there's probably a lot of other photographers who felt that way as well. But I was just, I got really into indoor cycling at the start of 2020 before lockdown, and obviously with what has happened, I've been doing a lot more. And we were still allowed to kind of go into other people's homes for work and stuff to shoot. So I thought actually this would be the perfect project to go about. It's like seeing how people are working out at home, which is super relevant, and also seeing like other people's setups. How they set up their bike and stuff. So it's kind of worked both ways. It was a personal interest, and it was also kind of relevant to the time.
And how have you found going into different people's homes and sort of the logistical side of things, actually shooting in these kind of either tight or maybe less than ideal spaces?
Mm-hmm. Well, that as well, so I've shot about 16 different people for it, so it's been quite a lot, and it's really kind of thrown me into a lot of different, difficult, tight situations where maybe I'd usually be used to like sticking up a big softbox or something like that. Whereas in people's homes, you don't really have that space, so you kind of it definitely taught me a lot about how to instantly go into a tricky space and try and get the best result. Really think on my feet and try and get that set up. And also just working by myself, no other team or anything like that. Just kind of back to basics.
I guess it's definitely getting the creative juices and sort of lateral thinking flowing.
I feel like that was a big part of my work that I kind of needed to improve as well. Like going into people's homes and shooting, mixing ambient light and a little bit of flash. I shoot predominantly sports stuff on location or in studio. It's very rare that I'll go into someone's home, but and the few times that I have, say for commissions or things like that in the past, I've always come away a little bit dissatisfied. So I thought this would be a perfect way of kind of mixing it up, and I definitely learned a lot of simple things like the different footprints of different stands. I've got like master stands which I tend to put a lot of my lights on, but the footprint on those is like almost a 3-foot diameter, and if you're trying to sandwich that up against someone's sofa so you can get it over their screen where they've set up their bike and you don't want to get it in shot, it's tricky. So quite quickly I started, right, okay, I need to rent a C stand for today or whatever.
And I think it's probably a good example to a lot of the people watching this channel who don't necessarily have access to all the gear. They've maybe got access to like one strobe head and a basic camera. I think it goes to show that you don't need to overthink gear when it comes to photography. It's such a bad way of approaching it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like initially when I started shooting the Pain Caves project, I would turn up with a carload of different stands, different lights, different gels, everything like that, reflectors and all that stuff. But in the end, I think for most of the shots, I would use maybe one light or daylight and a reflector or something like that. Yeah.
And I think you've been using the Photek SoftLighter recently.
Yes. Oh yeah, you just got one, didn't you? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I've
Yes,
been
I
using
did.
for the Pain Caves project. I've been using this small. I think it comes in 3 sizes, right? Small, medium, large. I can't remember the exact dimensions, but I've been using the small one because it's like, I think it's about 3 feet.
Yeah.
Or 2 feet. It's quite small. But with a C stand on an arm, you can really kind of get it and just enhance what would be like a nice daylight. Yeah, I love those things. Yeah.
And it's funny because I'd been assisting on a load of projects like over the last few years, and I'd always seen them kicking about. A lot of the sort of big photographers will use them, and I'd never really understood why until I bought one. But there's just something lovely about the quality of light that comes out of them. I mean, it does what it says on the tin. The soft lighter, it is just a beautiful soft light, and if you can get it in nice and close to your subject, it really does sort of accent or almost act as daylight in a lot of situations.
Yeah, I think what spurred me on to start using it more was there's a lot of behind the scenes videos of Annie Leibovitz online. I think
I was literally just going to bring this up, so this is perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, when she shot a lot of Disney stuff. I think there's a lot of Disney behind the scenes stuff, and there's even an old assistant. I don't know if you've seen the she's someone who used to assist her wrote a blog post about basically how they set up the lights and everything, and kind of gives like a detailed breakdown of where they put the lights and all that stuff. Um, yeah, so I kind of knew that she used one, and you could see that she doesn't point it straight at the subject. She kind of sets it at 90 degrees and kind of
Mm.
lets it.
Mm.
And I like doing that with soft boxes and stuff anyway. So with the Photek, it just works even better. And who else did I see? I was listening to a podcast with, I think it was Tom Oldham, who is a London-based sort of commercial photographer, and he talks about using the Photex as well. And he mixes a lot of daylight and with a little bit of flash, but it still looks like ambient light, or it looks like enhanced ambient light. So he's got some behind the scenes stuffs on his Instagram. And then so those two things, I was like, right, okay, I need to start using it.
You've been sort of heavily involved in cycling for quite a long time, haven't you? I know you were riding BMXs back in the day. Are you still
Yeah,
still involved in that?
yeah. Well, I still own a BMX. I don't ride it as much as I would want to. They've put like big fencing around the local skate park and stuff. And usually I am like a sort of mid-30s aged guy who's at the skate park and looks like he should have a kid with him and doesn't. And it's like there's lots of parents my age or even younger. So yeah, but that's kind of what got me into photography, really. I was doing my degree. My what did I do? I did a master's in visual communication, and one of the, you could use drawing, painting, whatever. One of the projects I was using a camera a lot, and I had an old camcorder, and I had like a 350D. I don't know if you're familiar with the old Canon. It's
Yep.
like their super entry level. Yeah. So I had a 350D. I had a Sony camcorder, and I thought I'll just sell both of those, and I'll get a 7D. This was when the 7D just launched, not too long after the 5D Mark II, about 10 years ago now. And I'll just do some video, and I'll just do some photos. And I was working at the skate park whilst I was at uni, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you actually how you first got into to photography, but I think you've answered it nicely there.
Yeah, and the skate park was the perfect sort of training ground because the manager didn't seem to mind us just taking photos when we were on shift, so long as no one was like falling over unnoticed,
Mm.
I would just set up a flash or two. I kind of got used to using like hot shoe flashes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, kind of like no idea what I was doing, like with sync speeds and stuff. I had no idea why half the screen was completely black, if you don't have your shutter slow enough. But just learned photography through that way. And then there was a couple of good riders, or like pro riders would show up in town, and I'd get some photos of them, and their sponsors would pick it up, and then magazines would pick it up, and that kind of was like, oh right, okay, I can make money
It just snowballed
doing.
from there.
Yeah,
And how did
yeah.
you transition from photographing BMX riders to like commercial sports and fashion photography?
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate. I was when I moved to London, I didn't really like know anything about assisting or working in studios or the photography industry at all. I just kind of thought it was fashion and weddings, pretty much. That's kind of what I thought it was. And I was working at a studio, and one of the assistants who was working there was a guy called Chris Parsons, who was like, "Yeah, come on set with us." And he assisted a photographer called David Clairhugh, who's a big advertising, primarily sports at the time. He's kind of shifting away from sports into more portraiture and celeb stuff. I think. I don't think he'd mind me saying that. But he shot a lot of big sports campaigns, and he kind of showed me like you can shoot sports, and it is a massive industry. Like that seems so obvious to me now, but at the time it was something I was completely unaware of, and it just threw me into the world of commercial sports stuff. Because the first few shoots we were with, it was like Red Bull F1, and it was the launch of BT Sport and Adidas World Cup campaigns, and I was just like, all of a sudden, faced with like the
Yeah.
biggest names in sport. It's like standing in front of the camera and to like all these like really professional photographers and crew and assistants who all knew what they were talking about. So that just kind of like opened my eyes into all that. Yeah.
And that's quite a good transition, actually. I was going to talk about sort of your opinions on the importance of assisting in the early days of your photography career. I mean, I'm still assisting now, and I'm sure I'll continue to assist for quite a long time. But I think for people with maybe no formal training, which I don't think you need in this industry, assisting is, in my opinion, the number one way to learn and build a career in the photography industry.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. Not to say that you can't make a career out of it, but one thing that assisting taught me, or at least it showed me, like what is possible. So now, when I'm kind of looking to progress in my career, I can kind of visualize what is possible because I've assisted great photographers, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's the scale of the shoots that I want to be shooting at. So and I've seen it, so I know it's possible, and I kind of just through observing have kind of built a roadmap of kind of how to get there. You know what that photographer did to get there.
And I think sometimes it's reassuring to know that the photographers who like you really aspire to shoot, like that you can shoot these things. It is within your abilities. It's just sometimes getting into that situation and doing it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, like all these photographers are fantastic at what they do, and that's how they've got to where they are. But when it comes down to it, and you're on set, it's like, well, this isn't like anything spectacular. You know, you're using the same light. You know, they might only be using a couple of lights or just a reflector or whatever, and they're kind of, yeah, they have mastered their craft, and that just comes through repetition, I think. But
and I think the biggest thing that I learned is the way they interact and direct. I mean, that's, I think, kind of the biggest jump from learning the technical, which I think, you know, you have to have an eye for it, but I think a lot of people can learn the technical over time, but it's that interaction with your subjects that you can't really learn. You have to develop that yourself.
Yeah, that's massive. And not for me anyway, when I was assisting, not just the way that the photographer interacted with the subject, but also with the client, that sort of relationship as well, because I think that's super important for not just on the day, but also repeat business and kind of building your reputation and just knowing kind of how to, you know, judging that barrier, you know, between photographer and client, and kind of making sure the client's getting everything they need, as well as what's actually happening in front of the camera as well.
Yeah, I mean, learning about the entire process of a shoot day is not something you're really going to be able to learn without experiencing it. You're not going to really be able to read up about it online and know how long hair and makeup will take, and sort of know how to interact with those clients and kind of how to behave on set, which should come as common sense to a lot of people, but sometimes it really doesn't, and it still baffles me from time to time.
Oh, it's and sometimes people don't, they assist and they're on set and they don't learn. Like there's some horror stories out there. I remember one assistant that was working, or I was assisting, and I used to assist this fashion photographer full time, and we got a second assistant in for the day. We kind of, from time to time, we'd have to get someone new that we haven't worked with, depending on whether the other assistants were available or not. And it was a fashion shoot, and it was a female model, and she wasn't like dressed in anything too revealing or anything. But for some reason, I glance over at this other assistant, and he's like, you know, when someone's sneakily taking a picture of the model.
Oh no!
I was just like, that's clearly like not the behavior.
No, it's just crazy. I was going to bring up sort of, it's almost exactly the same situation. There's a photographer who I've assisted a lot, and on a shoot a long time ago, he told me a story about, he was shooting a lingerie campaign. So you've got women who are pretty vulnerable, just sort of there in the open, wearing not a lot, probably not. Sometimes, you know, there are confident models, obviously, but it can still be pretty uncomfortable. And you've got a group of men in a room staring at you. And this assistant in between the shots decided to whip out his phone, just go straight up to the model, take a photo of her and say, oh, I can't wait to show the lads this. It's like, what goes through your mind to do that?
Yeah.
Obviously, he never got hired again and was just booted off the set. But it really blows my mind sometimes, the stories you hear and just the common sense that's lacked, and just the basic decency sometimes. It's just it's just mind blowing.
I do wonder, like, at the moment, like, just with this conversation, I'm wondering, like, can that sort of thing be learnt? Like, can someone? Because I feel like I came into the industry and I'm like, and I don't know if it's just from the jobs that I've done in the past, but I know like how to interact with new people, and I know social boundaries and stuff. But if you're that guy, can someone say to you, look, that's not cool, don't do that sort of thing? Or is he just going to continue to the next time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to come back from that one. I don't think anybody who does that really is going to stand a chance in the industry.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, that's it. There's lots of that happens. Social skills is a huge part of it.
So yeah, basically, if you're going to assist, please don't do that. Just have some decency and common sense, please, and you'll probably be okay. Because assisting really is just about common sense. It's not overly complicated once you learn sort of the basics with grip and lighting. It's just about being personable and sort of being there and doing pretty much everything that you need to do and going above and beyond sometimes just to help out, even if it's not for the photographer, if it's for the carrying the hair and makeup artist bags up the stairs, just even helping out the studio assistants who are already working there. Just any little thing is going to help.
Yeah, I think a photographer once said to me that he said, your job, this was when I was assisting, your job is to make my life as easy as possible. Like, if you can get to a point where you just hand me the camera and I push the button, that's perfect. Obviously, it's not going to be as close as that, but the principle's there.
Yeah, and I think that's the way you need to approach assisting, that assistants will want to start off in the industry to learn, which is absolutely fair enough. But at the end of the day, you do have a job to do, and basic things like just putting batteries on charge if you see that they're just sitting around, or you've got low batteries, making sure that the modeling lights turned off when there's a break, just things like that.
Yeah, because I guess when you're shooting, when you're doing your own thing, it's or when you're the photographer, I should say, simple things like that are there's so much going on. You've had so much back and forth with the client in the build up to the shoot. You're considering different types of crops, spacing for text potentially, if they need to, how you're going to deliver the images. You're dealing with real-time feedback from the client as well as the model. You might not have time to think, oh yeah, are the spare batteries on charge, or how much battery does the light have, or is it plugged in, or all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, almost being the second brain at times, because there's just so much to think about when you're shooting for a client. I mean, for me, the most stressful part of the day is normally driving, especially in London, just trying to get anywhere, load the car, unload the car is horrible. So just having somebody there, even just helping carry kit up the stairs and doing the basic things, and sort of talking to other people on set who I might not have a chance to kind of chat to, so they're not stood around just sheepishly in the corner. Things like that make such a big difference. I
used to try and always carry £10 coins, 10 £1 coins with me for parking. If you were assisting around London, the photographer would always get there and be like, oh, what's the deal with parking? And it's like, oh, have you got change? And then if you don't have change, it becomes this massive pain where they have to go to an ATM, get change, all that sort of stuff. So it's little things like that, like making little production things as simple as possible.
So we are both sort of running our own little YouTube channels at the moment. I think we started at maybe fairly similar times. Maybe has they been going for like a year or maybe 2 now? I'm not quite sure.
Well, I've had a YouTube channel for quite some time. I think I've deleted loads of the old videos, but when did I first start uploading? It must have been 2014-ish, 2015. And it was like daily vlogs sort of thing. Like, I'm going out on my bike today because I was
Casey
was
Neistat.
BMXing more often. And I would like, let's go and get a coffee. Here's my mate. We're going to do some grinds. And he just, stuff like that. And I would try and always kind of incorporate some photography based thing about it. But yeah, sometimes it was just like simple vlogs. And the reason I started, I don't know about you, Mike, I think it might be along the same lines, but I was assisting at the time, and there was no resources out there on like how, what is it like to assist and things like that. So I thought if I could just kind of vlog it a little bit and be like, okay, I'm on my way to set. I don't even really need to show that much on set. Maybe a little glimpse of the studio. Photographer probably doesn't want to show his lighting setup because so many are very precious about that. What goes into assisting, and other assistants getting into it could see it, and I never quite sort of saw that through, but it was definitely like an educational thing. But I feel like you're right, I did kind of restart maybe a few years ago. Yeah. What made you get into it? What made you start?
I think, yeah, similar reasons really. I mean, I've never been to university and college, so I've had no sort of formal education in any of the photography or video work I do, and everything that I've learned has been through YouTube pretty much. I mean, I've never been hugely academic, so I've never been a big fan of reading textbooks or reading up about the history of photography. I've always been more visual, so I've learned from sort of watching documentaries and also sort of educational videos on YouTube. So I kind of wanted to almost give something back in a little way that's kind of like simplified, basic, but also the content that I didn't really feel was out there. Just sort of getting actual footage from shoots behind the scenes and kind of explaining exactly what I'm doing, but also as a method of just documenting the shoots. I think I watch some of Gary V's content. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Crazy upbeat American dude, but he has some really good content and some real gems there. But he was talking about how documenting the work that he does with his company has just grown their sort of social media following exponentially over the years. And I think everybody kind of enjoys seeing that kind of glimpse behind the scenes of the day-to-day of what you do, even from getting up in the morning, how you start your day, moving into loading the car up, getting to the shoot, setting up, talking to models. So hopefully over the next year, that's the kind of content that I plan to put out, is more of almost turning it into a little reality show kind of thing.
Yeah, cool.
And just like following the process from start to finish. Without the maybe the influencer vibe and the the narcissism. Try and avoid some of that, but just to kind of show how a shoot really works.
Yeah, I think there's obviously loads of tech stuff out there, and that's super useful to know. This camera uses this sensor, blah blah blah, and that's all really helpful. But there's perhaps quite a bit less of like what actually goes into crafting and creating a career as a photographer. Like what does it actually entail? You can know everything you want about a camera, but that's not going to get you a job if you don't know how to get a client and how to use the camera, all that sort of stuff.
No, definitely. And I think that kind of content is really lacking, and why it can be very beneficial to sort of find a sort of mentor figure to kind of figure these things out. But it would be, I'd feel great if we can sort of put together that kind of content for people to learn from. Yeah,
absolutely. It's trickier. Well, I mean, you've done a great job of like showing the behind the scenes stuff. I've got a couple of videos on my channel where I'm like, I'm gonna do the shoot today, and then it just cuts to me sitting in the car after the shoot. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't get
I
any
mean,
footage, but
it is
here's one.
just so difficult. I mean, I've had the luxury of really only doing it on personal projects. So if it was a client project, I probably wouldn't do it unless I was able to literally just hand my phone on a little gimbal to sometimes even just the hair or makeup artist. People love playing with camera tech, especially if they haven't done it before. And it is incredibly easy to get very, very usable footage now. I mean, it would, in an ideal world, we'd have like a videographer shooting on proper cinema cameras and making everything look lovely. But for the purpose of YouTube, it's not really necessary. Just getting a minute of good behind the scenes can be really all you need for a video like that. And then talking about what you're doing. But no, I agree. It's very difficult to get that kind
Yeah,
of stuff on client jobs.
that goes kind of back to the Gary Vee thing that you were saying about documenting instead of
Mm.
creating. You know, all you need is a little snippet, a little insight into it. If you can kind of annotate over that, if you can narrate over it and give a breakdown to the viewer of what they're seeing, then that makes the world of difference. There's a photographer who I've started following recently, an American-based sports photographer called James Quantz. I don't know if you've seen his stuff.
Yes, I actually have, thanks to your video that you put up, and his
Yeah,
stuff's great. It's amazing, and
his,
the production value
yeah,
is there as well. He nails both the content and production value.
yeah. Well, I mean, all he does is I think he has like a little tripod. I'm using this camera on a little Manfrotto thing, and what might be his spare body for the day, or uh, a little power shot Canon thing, and he just sticks it there and leaves it to record, and then he kind of narrates over it, and he might kick in the audio a little bit from time to time, or sorry, my other half is like making dinner in the background or making lunch in the background.
The joys
Um,
of working from home.
yeah, working from home, right? Yeah, and then he just kind of narrates over it. But similar to what you do on yours, you know, when he's narrating, when he's cutting, the production value is really high, and obviously the production value of his or the quality of his images are really good. So it all comes together really nicely.
But it's just great to have that other creative outlet. I think it's, as I'm particularly quiet at the moment and imagine I will be for a little bit longer, it's just great to have something else to work on, like this series of podcasts. It's something that I don't think I would have done if lockdown didn't happen. But having YouTube as that extra outlet is great. And I mean, I think the thing I enjoy most about doing this YouTube stuff now is that there's absolutely no limitations on what we can create. We are the creative director, producer, everything, and it's kind of endless. The possibilities really are endless. It's, as long as you've kind of got a vision or a dream, you can execute it. And yeah, there's like all sorts that we can do with YouTube now.
That was inspiring. That was
Thanks.
a little
No,
speech
thanks.
there.
Hopefully some of this will inspire a couple of you out there, especially for a
Yeah.
first podcast. Got no idea how this is going to turn out, guys, but hopefully you're enjoying it.
Hopefully there'll be at least 1 minute of good advice
Yeah,
in there.
that's all we need from an hour, just 1 minute.
How did you, on the note of YouTube, how did you find, or how do you find, like, for me, for example, 'cause I've been assisting or kind of in this sort of commercial photography or commercial fashion photography world for sort of 10 years to begin with. It was like, oh, YouTubers, influencers, like the professional industry really kind of turned their nose up at it, and it was a bit of a you know, the amateurs hang out on
Mm.
Instagram and YouTube sort of thing. Um, and for the longest time, even probably to this day, a little bit, it kind of plays on my mind a little bit, like, oh, I don't want to, you know, what is everyone going to think about it if I am, you know, vlogging or YouTube or making a YouTube video, or even being on Instagram where sort of experienced professionals follow me. If they see me talk about my YouTube, is that going to like decrease my value as a photographer? Is that something that you've think about, or are
Not
you
really.
just
I don't think
too
so. I
young for
think
that?
probably too young for that. I mean,
Yeah.
if I kind of overthought everything all the way from the beginning, I probably wouldn't have even bothered picking up a camera. I think it's very
Yeah.
easy to kind of worry in a way what other people are thinking about you. And there's definitely that stigma with YouTube photographers and professional photographers, but I think we can both be comfortable in the fact that we are working photographers, we are shooting our own projects, and that I think any sort of insight we can give people is valuable. I mean, as long as there is actual value in the stuff that we're saying, I think that's the importance, and probably just not churning out the same sort of video over and over again, which is something that I'm struggling with a little bit at the moment. I've been using satellite to light to sort of show people lighting setups, and there's kind of a little bit of a limit with what I can do with that. In fact, it was quite funny the other day. The first comment I got on the video, along with the dislike, was along the lines of useless, show real models, not 3D, nobody wants to see this. And that's the only dislike, and now it's doing a lot better. But cheers for that, mate. I think you've missed the point of the video a little bit. We're in a global pandemic and can't really shoot, but yeah, cheers for that, mate. Thanks. That was useful feedback.
On the note of satellite, it's so good. I mean, I haven't used it. I've just seen it on your videos, and I keep meaning to be like, okay, today I'm going to check out satellite and see what that's about. And I want to try and recreate some stuff that I've shot in the past, and just to compare it, because the video that you made where you're using I think you have like a big softbox off to the side of the model with a softbox below it or something, and when you make the comparison between what you actually shot and what satellite shows, it's so close. It is identical.
It is, and I think like I don't plan on ever recommending software to people that I don't genuinely believe in, but it's something that I use to sort of previs every single shoot that I do, pretty much, because it is just so accurate. And just having the chance to play around with a lighting setup in 3D space without having to organize a test shoot of paying for a studio, a model, bringing a hair and makeup artist, and then doing all the retouching just to test something out. It's great. And obviously, we're going to apply that to a real shoot at some point, but the idea is that it will make the real shoot better, and you won't have to faff around with kind of the practice. But I have been blown away with how good it is, and it's constantly improving, which is great. They just added like big scrims and things, which is something I think I asked them for a while ago, and they put it in. So
brilliant.
Yeah, it's nice to know that they actually listen to their community.
Yeah, I need to check it out. But going back to what you were saying about people just commenting, being like, useless, use real models. I had a couple this morning, like when I checked my I check for comments every now and then on YouTube Studio, and try and reply to people and stuff, and it was just like, I can't remember exactly what it was. It was something about the audio levels, which I should know way better. But from time to time, if I'm switching cameras or switching to my phone, my iPhone does this thing where it peaks, and then if I don't say anything for a split second, it'll really peak the audio. So then the first couple of words is really high, and then it dips down. And it never used to do it, but I broke the screen. Yeah. So he commented on the audio, and it was like this 4 lines on YouTube of like, this is what you did wrong. This is what you should. Oh yeah, it was a behind the scenes thing. It's like, you should actually show. I think the comment was, you should actually show some behind the scenes rather than us just looking at your face. But anyway, good job. And it's like, yeah, you've just totally slated the video and then said good job. And it's like, a
bit contradictory, isn't it? But I think going back to our original thing of sort of judgment and what other maybe professional photographers will think, it just doesn't matter. Like, I just don't care. And I think that's kind of the only way that I'm ever going to keep improving, that as long as sort of the general reception is that you're doing good stuff, which you'd hope to be as a photographer, and both our channels get a good reception. So don't listen to the few people who might be like, oh, he's just a YouTube photographer,
Yeah.
or oh, the audio quality isn't as good as it can be. Like,
Yeah.
we're all learning. This stuff's free. You don't have to watch it. You can just ignore it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. I just find it kind of, the majority of the time I find it quite funny because it's like so absurd, especially if you're confident in what you've put out there. Or you don't even have to be that confident. You just have to know that it is what it is. Like, I know it's not perfect. I know it looks crap. Sitting in the car in a dark car park, phone, filmed on my phone, saying I forgot to get behind the scenes. But so I'm at ease with what it is. Otherwise, I wouldn't have uploaded it.
But it's honest. It's honest, and I think it's good to keep things honest and true. And we can only improve, can't we?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's quite surprising. Like, both our chat, you must be about 1,000 followers.
Yeah, just hit 1,000 the other day. So
Whee!
getting close to that monetization to make a couple of pennies off of each video.
Yeah. Both our channels are about that size, and it's surprising that like comments like that come in already. I thought it was only like when you've got tens of thousands. But it happens.
It happens, and some people just won't like you or your face, and just got to accept that.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah, but that's YouTube for you.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to quickly chat about on this podcast is a lot of people come to this channel to kind of learn about lighting. That's kind of what I'm trying to push as much as possible. I was wondering if we could take a little look at some of your commercial projects and just briefly talk about how you're lighting a couple of them.
Let's do it.
So I'm going to try and share the screen here. Let's see how this goes. Being a first. Got your website preloaded.
There we go.
And let's start with Grindhouse then. I'm going to load up the first photo here. So just talk us through what you've done here.
Cool. Yeah, so this is pretty simple. This is a pretty simple setup from what I remember. It is just, excuse me, it's a beauty dish, just with nothing on it. Just like one of those, is it 46 inch? Is that like that size, like 2 feet, maybe 1.5 feet, something like that. Camera left, so to the right hand side of the model. Quite harsh. And then we're against a white backdrop, and I've got two V flats, which is like two 8x4 foot polyboards in a V shape, if you don't know what this is already. And the light is bouncing off the V flats into the background, and just creating this white background. And then in the grade, I've kind of grayed it up a little bit so you can see it's not quite perfectly white. And
it's quite contrasty because you've got the light off to the side.
Yeah, I filled in the shadows a little bit with just a white reflector, I think it was, so it's not completely black. But it's something that I shot. I don't know if we haven't spoke too much about testing, but I personally believe that testing is super important. It's basically practice, So there was a test that I shot maybe a couple of years ago where I shot something very similar. So I kind of already had that set up in mind. So it was like, okay, when they sent the reference over, I was like, yeah, that test, I'm just going to do that lighting.
I was going to pull up this photo here, particularly like this. Is this a similar setup?
This is quite different, this setup. So first half of the morning, we shot this setup, and then towards the end of the day, we just shot the headshots against the white. So this is a bit more complicated. I think I had like 6 lights on this. And it's similar to I shot a lot for Gymshark, and I shot a lot of their app, and it's kind of a similar setup, but I've just developed it a bit more over time and thought, all right, okay, I can add in this little thing. And I was had a lot of freedom over the Grindhouse stuff because they sent me rough images, and I know the client quite well. I've worked with them a few times before on different projects. So they had a bit of trust in me to like kind of go with my own lighting. So in that one, there's 2 4x1 softboxes behind to kind of create that clip. Camera left. Well, it's on both sides, but it's more prominent than that image. Camera left, I think it is. And Then I have kind of what is my go-to. I think you might know this actually. Is a 2 by 2 meter frame, which is kind of at 45 degrees, just above the model. And through that, usually just I kind of tweak. I play about with it quite a lot, but I feel like I've really with this grindhouse shoot, I really found like what's something that I'm going to stick with, and it's just two kind of transparent white umbrellas through that go through the 2 by 2. I think it's like a quarter stop silk.
Yeah,
If that's does that make sense? Is that
it
following
does.
that? So there's that, and that kind of creates a nice overall, really soft, kind of similar to daylight. You know, if you
Yeah,
imagine that
and a
there's
big light source.
yeah, it's just this 2 by 2 meter light source. It's really soft. And then on the other side of the scrim, so subject side of the scrim, I had a beauty dish with a grid, just to kind of really create almost a spotlight on the subject, so it kind of picks up little highlights and stuff as well.
Mm.
And some of these you might even be able to. I like zooming into the eyes on a lot of other
Yeah,
photographers'
so
work, and
I
you
was
can
just
see all the
about to
clip
pull that
lights,
up. I can see the catch light,
the catch
and
lights. Yeah.
we'll zoom into that on the edit.
Hmm.
But yeah, I can see two clear catch lights in the eyes. Are
Yeah.
those both of your light sources? Have you got a
Hmm.
fill in somewhere as well?
Hmm. Yeah, and the so the grid I think was slightly off to the left, and then there's a softbox uh, just kind of underneath the camera, just to
Yeah, so almost
take
like a
away
clamshell
any
kind of
shadows. Yeah,
setup.
yeah. So because if you use just a toppy light, you will get like weird. Well, not weird, but you'll get unflattering shadows under the eyes and stuff like that. So it's always good to fill that in with either a reflector or just a little softbox if you can.
And I know you shoot in natural light a lot, which is like one of the reasons why I was sort of drawn to your work. You really capture those like intimate or in between moments without it kind of looking staged. It looks really natural and nice, and I guess
Hmm.
that comes from your sports background, capturing those kind of brief split second moments that
Yeah.
don't look too staged or set up. They really do feel like you're in the moment.
Hmm.
So I'm going to pull up another shoot of yours.
Sure. Again, that while you pull it up, again, that goes back to kind of the importance of assisting. There's a fashion photographer who I used to assist called Pete Bedonamu, and there was another a menswear photographer who I used to assist called David Goldman. And when I was assisting them, the way they interacted with their model, they would often get the model moving from A to B. And I think it was David especially. I remember him saying like, I'm not looking to shoot A or I'm not looking to shoot B. I'm looking to shoot like what's
Mm,
happening from when you get
mm,
from there to there, because that's usually when they're at their most relaxed,
yeah.
when they're not thinking about this pose, this pose. You see a
Mm.
lot of fashion models, and some of them, the majority of them, are great at making it work. They're like, see a flash, move, flash, move, flash, move. Often these two photographers in particular would get their models moving, and I think that's something that I learned from them and tried to carry on into my own work.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I can't remember who said this. I think somebody said this before, but sort of modeling for photography is almost like a dance in the way you move between poses, and you wait for the flash, you move, you wait for the flash, you move, and you
Mm.
capture that moment in between. And I think the less experienced models sort of, you flash, waits, stops, and they kind of try and get that moment sort of after the move, at the end of the move, rather than sort of that in between moment. And I think that's kind of the difference that I find between a really, really good model who's very comfortable and confident in what they're doing and somebody who's
Hmm.
less experienced.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So let's pull up this Gymshark shoot, and this is entirely different from the last shoot.
Yeah, this is all pretty much daylight with either diffusion or a reflector.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, this looks fairly side or backlit.
Hmm.
Can you just like run us through this one?
Yeah, so it's early in the day, the sun is just rising, sort of camera left, and that is what is creating that clip on the model, and then you can kind of see that the front of her face is just kind of filled in with, I think it was a silver reflector. Yeah, just bouncing straight back in. It was really like, we shot this in Calpe, which is the south of Spain, I think. Pretty much exactly a year ago. And yeah, can't beat a good bit of sunlight, and then just bounce it back in.
No, it looks lovely. These really do. The pastel tones of the location are just crazy, and they do work with Gymshark's clothing, who are pretty notorious for their color palettes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a place called La Moraya Roja.
Okay.
Roja spelled Roja.
Yeah.
It's like a kind of like an apartment complex. I think there's probably 10 different really tall Lego looking buildings, and they're all like, there's a pink one, there's a blue one, there's a red one. Yeah, and they just it's been rented out. I think we got chatting to some of the locals, and the money they make from sort of renting it out for commercial shoots kind of goes into the upkeep of the complex, and that just kind of funds it that way. But there's been a lot of big ad campaigns and stuff shot there as well.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. You quite often see the sort of same locations pop up on campaigns for a reason, like somewhere like that, and I'm sure it's geared up to productions as well. So how are you going about lighting the group photos then in the same shoot?
So this is shot not too long after that first shot that you just showed. I think it's probably like half an hour later, but and the sun is still camera left. I've basically turned 90 degrees and then taken this shot. But the clip isn't as harsh. That's because we've got a big scrim out. It might not be a big scrim. It could even just be a little reflector. The reflectors that come with the sheets. So you've either got black, silver, gold, or you can use it for a bit of diffusion as well. So just taking the sunlight off them, and then I think I have a reflector camera right, just to kind of fill in the side of the face, and then so it's quite a sort of, I kind of flattened it out a little bit, and then just in the edit kind of got that pastel-y feel across.
Yeah, and it almost looks a little bit sort of hazy. I think that's just from the color of the sky and the sunlight. Is this something you worked on heavily in post, or is this kind of fairly close to what you're getting in camera?
Not a million miles away. I tend to so I shoot to Capture One. I was tethering to Capture One and do a grade in Capture One, and then a little bit of retouching in Photoshop after. The thing with this image here, with the wall in the background, originally that wall was like a deep red, and I just color matched it to either some of the other pink walls that we used, or some of the pink outfits that they had, and it just fits the story a lot more. It totally transforms that image.
Yeah, it does. I don't think it definitely wouldn't have the same impact if it didn't match the pink sort of outfit so well.
Yeah, and the haziness is just brought by bringing up the shadows a little bit. Yeah, I think I kind of pinch the mid-tones and the blacks, if we're kind of to get into it. So brighten up the mid-tones and pinch the blacks, but then also the little bit in Capture One where you squash the black, but then you also bring up the sort of haze of it. I'm not sure what the technical term of that is, but I'm sure you know what I mean. Yeah.
No, I know what you mean, but I can't find the technical term either. I think we have covered an awful lot, and originally I'd said, well, I'll chat to you for half an hour, and we've gone into the hour mark now. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on to this first episode and talking with me. It's always good to catch up with you, mate.
No worries. Thank you for inviting me.
On a closing note, if you had any advice for sort of young or amateur budding photographers, maybe let's disregard coronavirus. Let's pretend the world's back to normal. If you're just starting out, what would you recommend to people?
I'm glad you asked this because I've been thinking about this a little bit recently. Um, the What's been on my mind recently, I mean, there's loads of different advice you can give people who are just starting out, but what is on my mind recently is to pay attention to where you get your influences from. Like, what is it that is feeding your creativity? Who is setting the mark where that you want to get to? And it kind of goes back to what we were saying about assisting a little bit as well. But it, there's loads of photographers on every kind of social media platform, and I think that is great, and it's fantastic that everyone is kind of expressing their creativity. But if you're going to look to people for advice as well as inspiration, and perhaps how you're going to, if you want to make it a career, how are you going to map out that career, I would say just kind of pay attention to, what would you call them, heroes, or what your inspirations have done in their own career. Do you know, does that make sense? Because it's
Yeah.
easy to kind of give advice without actually without speaking from experience, if that makes sense.
And I think also there's a book I've been listening to recently on Audible called Start With Why. And I think it is the author Simon Sinek. I think I'm saying that right. But just starting with your core beliefs of why you do what you do, not what you do. Why are you taking photos? What particularly inspires you? What are your core beliefs, and why do you shoot images in a certain way?
Yeah, absolutely. It still happens to me all the time. I will get influenced by something, or I'll listen to a podcast, or I'll watch a YouTube video and it'll feature a photographer who shoots a particular type of way, and I divert off into a completely different path. You know, I might be looking at a photographer's work who shoots beauty, and I'll suddenly be like, right, I'll wipe my website, I'm going to stick up all the beauty stuff, and I'm just going to do that. And it's like, you know, then a few days pass and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, okay, put all the sports stuff back on. You know, or be like landscapes. I love shooting landscapes. You know, I love going up to Scotland and shooting some land. I'm going to put a landscape page on my website, and you just muddy the waters. I think that's something that I've been massively guilty of, and have really narrowed down over lockdown, is if you're a business, if you've taken it that far as to, now I'm a photographer, I want to do it full time, you have to have guidelines. Like, no, we just post beauty and portraiture, or we just post sport. Like, that's the photographer I am.
Definitely.
Because,
and I think, defining the niche is the most important kind of advice I've ever got. You're as a professional photographer, you're never going to be hired to do everything. You're going to be hired to do one thing particularly well.
Yeah, I mean, if you imagine that you're commissioning a photographer, you find yourself if you imagine yourself as an art director or a client, and you have two websites in front of you, and you need to shoot a still life, and you've got one guy and all he has on his website is still life, and you've got another guy who's got sports, beauty, still life, landscape, no matter how good that guy's still life is, you're probably going to go with the guy who is just a still life photographer 9 times out of 10. Which is, it's hard to stick by those rules sometimes when you have to enforce them on yourself when you're your own boss. But that is, something that has been on my mind a bit recently as I've been tinkering with my website.
As we all
you're
have.
saying about, what you're saying about knowing your why is a big one as well, because ultimately that's what it's all about. You've got to enjoy it.
You do. Very interesting book. Definitely recommend listening to that or reading it, whatever way you want to consume it. But thank you so much, Rich.
No worries. Thanks, Mike. I will look forward to watching the rest of your YouTube videos.
Thank you. See you soon, mate.
See ya.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll try and post these as regularly as possible over the next few months. If you did like this video, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell to be notified of when I release a new video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.